Good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, 21 February 2022. Time for episode 26 of The Last Admiral. The next chapter is a fun one. We're getting away from the sad stuff for a while, thank God. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to back up a little to refresh everyone's memory of this chapter. Queen Aphra and the Demon King. Lothia granted much of her own power to her firstborn, abilities that included the capacity to travel through the various dimensional planes of existence at will. Queen Aphra used this endowment frequently for the betterment of her own ends. Her destination was the pit of Hades. She sought one of its most feared rulers, a king of demons, Nosferatu, an Orcan kind who bore many names. Among them were Abaddon, Apollyon, and Orpheus. The loss of her daughters was an act of betrayal that would not go unpunished. She would see to that. Her children's bones, now safely housed in the temple at Farad Hoth, awaited her return in their resurrection. Her own power was such that she could walk through hell and back without fear. For no demon or agent of evil dared to oppose her, knowing the matron whose power filled her both body and soul. Walking barefoot along the shores of the sea of endless torment, she was dressed in the sacred robes of the coven, colored black and red, and trimmed with gold. Waves of lava washed over her feet but did her no harm. She carried no weapons. Okay, so the footnotes are about Nosferatu, the origin of it, and the obvious New Testament book of Revelation, and also we know that Orpheus is a creation of Gary Gygax and company, who were the creators of Dungeons and Dragons. So that's all in the footnotes. Okay. She carried no weapons, for her magic was supreme. Her mind was troubled, disturbed by a haunting prophecy and the continued existence of the one bloodline that could potentially do her harm. Acklon Lucheron and his family had always acted in opposition to the desires of Lothia. The institution of Parliament was the work of Acklon's most distant relative, forming the powerful legislative body under the guise of easing the governance of the Empire's military and political goals. It was a cunning ruse, to be sure, for its ultimate goal was to usurp power from the Coven of Lothia, the very source of rulership that had liberated the Doc Elfar people. Still greater was the insult provided by her very own prophet, who foretold of the destruction of the goddess and her sect by House Lucheron. Now only one descendant remained, unless Zhao had failed her twice, and with Vlad traveling through Under-Earth, the perfect opportunity existed to ensure his permanent disappearance. Acklon was a highly respected military strategist and a decorated admiral who had won countless battles for the Empire, and as such, his influence and reputation had the capacity to sway parliamentary decisions. Any direct action against the Admiral or his house would be highly scrutinized and could result in rebellion. By enlisting the aid of a reliable third party, she could avoid any suspicion among Parliament that the boy's death was a matter of her orchestration. She tolerated the Parliament so long as their goals were in line with her own, but should they betray her, she would feed them all to Arachnidon. Reclining in his woven blue beach chair was the means to her salvation. A gigantic, bloated, hugely muscled, gray-haired being with satyr's legs, a goat's countenance rested there. Holding a stout casting rod between his human-like hands, its enchanted line immersed in the bubbling, noxious lava pool that was Hades' Sea. His 10-foot-long whipping tail was tipped with a poisonous barb and constantly busy behind him, keeping a few lingering barrowflies away from him. A silver cooler sat by his left hand and an iron bucket by his right. In the bucket were dozens of segmented worms with twisted, diabolical human faces, housing the most evil of all mortal souls, croaking and nipping at one another. Tinted sunglasses rested across the bridge of his ram-like head. His body was unadorned, save for black, baneful chains forced upon him by his father, and a pair of blue and green Bermuda shorts. The ethereal, chaotically arranged restraints smoldered about his torso, but there, in the burning pit that was his home, they hindered him not. "Aphra, my dear," he praised, "it has been an age." "Good to see you too, Prince of Wretchedness." "Flattery will get you everywhere, my dear, but don't tell me you've come about your boy Zal." "That's another matter entirely," Aphra asserted while standing next to the massive being whose height was nearly 3 times her own. "I need a favor from you." "A favor?" Abaddon roared. "Why, my hand is only just regenerated from the last favor that I did for your daughter. Ridiculous. I owe you no more favors." "For payment, then," Aphra requested. "Tell me the job, and I shall determine the payment." "I want you to send the caretakers against the son of Aklon and his house. I want them destroyed utterly." "That is a tall order indeed," Abaddon declared. "Why, I am perfectly happy here. I have everything that I need. An ocean full of tortured souls, and a cooler full of ale. Why, Azimuth himself sent me a case of an exciting drink from the Milky Way that he called soda. It is really quite refreshing." "I have no doubt," Aphra replied unamusedly. "But I also have no time. What will it take for me to get you off your bloated ass, you reprehensible, vile pool of discontent?" "Oh, you know how I love it when you talk dirty to me. But you're not really my type. You don't even have a tail or wings. So boring." "I am waiting." Abaddon sat in quiet contemplation for a time, with his immense index finger resting against his fishing line, ever ready for the insistent tug of a pain-racked soul. Slaves, magic, or perhaps some more imaginative gifts all crossed his mind. But in reality, he had everything that a demon in his position could ever need. In the end, he settled upon the currency of the living, so often useful even to a being in his position. "Oh, okay. You know that I was just having a little fun. I know of your plans, and I have no problem with them as long as they do not interfere with my dominion. Gold in the sum of 100,000 pieces should be sufficient, and Zal will remain here with me as my servant until such time as I consider his debt paid in full." Aphra was torn, but immortality bred patience, and so she consented. The price was suspiciously less than she had imagined that it might be. "Agreed." With a wave of her hand, she opened a rift in time and space, bringing forth by telekinetic will, a trio of chests containing more than the requisite fee. "This must happen before the sun sets on Shang Sun. Otherwise, the son of Aklon will be beyond our grasp." Abaddon casually examined the treasure and replied, "Relax, my lady. Time passes by slowly here. Baelor's brother already stands before the fishmen. They will march into the pores of Shang Sun within hours and reduce Aklon's house to ashes. Why not sit a while and enjoy the heat of the sea and a bottle of ale or soda? It will be fun." Smiling broadly and content with their pact, she opened the cooler wide and withdrew an ale and a soft drink. Removing the cork from the ale, she drank it quickly, as she suddenly had a great thirst. "By the blessed goddess, that was abysmal." "Of course it was, my dear." When she looked uncertainly at the strange can of soda, Abaddon helped her out with a flick of his tail. "Oh," she declared after a sip, "that is most unusual." Finding a comfortable spot in the sand, she sat and watched the Prince of the Pit as he skillfully probed the molten depths for tortured souls. It was a hot day in Hades, and the soft drink was surprisingly refreshing. Abaddon was her favorite demon, after all, but she would never tell him that. The young masters. Sorry. The young masters sped away from their childhood home, with the reckless abandon of youths kept chained too long at their studies. Finally, the grand world of their dreams loomed before them. They were driven forward solely by their own wills and not by the commands of their elders. The rolling pastures of their home soon gave way to the untamed jungle surrounding the towering twin peaks of the island's long-dormant volcano. The foliage was thick, but they knew the mountain trails that ascended the hillsides well. The ice moon ruled the heavens that night, casting its pale blue glow across the land. Vlad stood within its light for a moment, tall and lean, fit but not fully grown, with his father's hawkish face flushed with the exertion of the climb. He wore leather boots, cobbled for hiking, and his clothes were well chosen, plain durable linen, blended of dark colors and belted at the waist. His rucksack was full, with flaps tied down, and 100-foot coil of rope complete with a grappling hook wrapped around his torso from shoulder to waist. Decapitator, his father's sword, hung from his hip, both bold and ready. Derek, hard at work scaling the mountain trail behind him, was dressed in a similar fashion, with a belted short sword in its scabbard, and carrying a 6-foot staff with a broad spearhead affixed. Shorter yet broader of chest, he was slightly slower of pace than his brother, but his strength allowed him to carry a great deal of weight for long periods. Nevertheless, the trail was very steep, covered with treacherous loose stones, and overgrown with clinging vines that grabbed hold of every loose corner of gear and clothing. When they stopped to rest, their breathing was heavy in the thin mountain air. Combing his short dark hair with his fingers, Derek tried to strip the sweat from his head and face. Smiling broad, toothy smiles, they took in the spectacular view. They looked toward the south, where firelight was visible in the tower over 10 miles away, and everywhere to the east the grandeur of the ocean loomed as far as their eyes could see. "It is quite a climb," Vlad said. "We should have trained more up here," Derek observed, "and then maybe it wouldn't hurt so badly." "If we want to reach the cave by dawn," Vlad noted, "then we'll have to keep pushing the pace a little." "It is one hell of a view." "The best," Vlad replied. "Well, lead on then. Stay alert. I saw tiger tracks about 50 yards back, and it was a big one." Derek shrugged, his grip on his spear growing tighter. "It's just like us to avoid one danger by traveling fast into another one." Smiling genuinely, Vlad paused to examine the winding forest trail ahead as it ascended the slope. The jungle was dense on both sides, with dangling vines and small rivulets of water that cut down the mountainsides from the peaks. Somewhere, up ahead, large groups of monkeys were screeching and causing a ruckus. "Our tiger could be just ahead." "Great," Derek answered. Eager for adventure, Vlad set a grueling pace. Forced to move nearly at his limit, Derek followed without complaint. A serpent and not a tiger had upset the monkeys. It was a python of considerable size, in excess of 12 feet, working its way along the forest canopy above them and hunting patiently. The monkeys, black-furred and nearly 4 feet tall, howled with wild abandon. Swinging from limb to limb, they easily outdistanced their prey, but the snake was relentless and methodical. The primates could have fled to safety, but instead they seemed to crave the danger that the snake represented. They hardly noticed the duo as they quietly moved along the trail beneath them. Within the hour they were crossing the final treacherous slopes that led to the great cleft in the twin peaks that housed the secret entrance into the vast labyrinth of under-earth passageways which they sought. Dark, jagged, and towering, the last remnants of the volcano reached up ahead of them in twin, pyramidal spires, well cloaked in fertile green jungle. The trail was now nearly indecipherable, as plant life and falling stones had nearly erased it. But follow it they did until the northernmost spire revealed the cave that would begin the second leg of their journey. Overgrowth had nearly sealed off the entrance, but something had torn a large hole through it, around which many bones were scattered. Of course, Derek declared, it is the tiger's lair. Vlad concentrated for a moment, listening inwardly, scanning the nearby tunnels ahead with his mind's eye. It's empty. You are sure? Derek asked. Mostly, Vlad replied. Let's rest here until we catch our breaths and then move in. This is a perfect place for us to program a second location on our mirrors, Derek stated. Let me show you how simple it is. Removing his rucksack, he opened the top flap and removed 2 small mirrors, framed by the cast metal body of a black widow spider. When he depressed the rightmost eye, the mirrors expanded in size, reaching a full height of 6 feet by 3 feet wide, and he then explained. Each mirror can store an 8 factorial number of destinations. By orienting one leg with another or a combination of others, the mirror is programmable to send its travelers to that location from its home position. Once a desired setting is decided upon, the 2 large central eyes must be depressed, first the left eye and then the right eye, thus storing the desired locations, like so. What happens if you use the same combination for another location? The previous waypoint will then be overridden, effectively lost in preference to the new command. That could be either good or bad. Each mirror can store so many points that should never be a problem. Now both of our mirrors contain 2 waypoints, this cave entrance and the basement in the mansion. By traveling through the plane of death, we can return home at will. You make it sound so tempting. Most travelers will never become aware of the energies of the negative plane. Instead, they will simply step from one point in space to another point, instantaneously. And what about those few who do experience it, Vlad asked. They may feel horror or wonder, Derek surmised. Who can know? Both good and evil exist there. The mirror merely harnesses the negative energy as a conduit. But surely there is some danger. Only if the traveler wills himself to intentionally avoid the exit door. In that case, they could become lost in the plane of death, possibly forever. I'm glad you made me aware of that danger. Of course, Derek replied. But please do let me continue. Once all of the travelers are through, depress the leftmost eye, and the mirror's portal will deactivate, and then it will shrink down for transport. By manipulating the legs while in its small form, the mirrors allow communication with other possessors of the mirrors, enabling speech across potentially infinite distances. Amazing, Vlad declared, truly impressed. Quite, Derek responded. And the mirrors are protected from damage by powerful spells and glyphs resistant to magic. Only a titanic, crushing blow could potentially break one. And what would happen then, may I ask? It could result in a catastrophic release of negative energy in the form of an explosion, Derek theorized, or perhaps an implosion, sucking everything within a large radius into the plane of death. Vlad's mind was alive with the potential uses of his father's invention, now perfected and finally realized by his lifelong friend. We must tell no one of these devices, at least not until the time is right. Until then, we reserve their use to our own household only. Agreed. Happy with his work, Derek wrapped the mirrors carefully in their protective cloth and returned one to his backpack. Then he gave the other to Vlad. These are too valuable to carry together, Derek said. Now that you know how to use it, you should keep this with you whenever possible. Push your mirror's 8th leg all of the way back to set it for contact. My mirror's contact will be with the 7th leg pushed back. If we separate, we will have a way to find each other. Shouldering their loads, Derek took up his spear, and Vlad prepared his sword. "I am ready," Derek reported. "Now lead on." Crawling beneath the hanging vines, they entered the cave. Its ceiling was nearly 30 feet in height, with walls descending jaggedly down to the floor of lava rock beneath their feet. Scattered, gnawed bones lay all about the cave, especially before the east passage, but they seemed old, as if they had lain there for ages. It appeared that the tiger no longer resided there. "I memorized the trail from Father's map," Vlad said, "but not every detail of the side passages. I think that it is time for another look at it." Aklon's subterranean map consisted of a few dog-eared parchments, now gray and faded with age. They were cavers' maps, stored in an ivory tube well corked and waterproofed with wax. The first page illustrated the cave entrance to the hidden passageways and a few nearby cavern chambers. Vlad oriented himself in the map to match the lay of the land. "The tunnel sweeps east to a dead end, but our road lies along this northward branch." "We need to clear that eastern cave," Derek directed. I'd hate to have that tiger on our trail." Focusing his will, Vlad reached out with his mind's eye, listening for thoughts and emotions that might emanate from a creature lying in wait ahead of them. "The tiger is gone," Vlad stated. "I sense no intelligences except our own in this area." Carefully, they crept into the chamber with their weapons readied. Nothing could have prepared them for the horrific sight that awaited them there. Bones filled the tiger's lair, as might be expected. If indeed that is what it was. But these shards had been stacked selectively and with great care. A gigantic tower of skulls, both humanoid and bestial, rose hauntingly toward the ceiling along the east-facing wall, and these were stacked to a height unreachable by any ordinary tiger. Derek stood transfixed by the malign spectacle. Taking it all in, he expected that the titanic thing that resided here would appear at any moment. "Whatever once called this cave home has gone," Vlad observed. "There was a darkness here," Derek muttered fearfully. "I can feel its evil taint in the air. It was no tiger." "We may never know the answer to this riddle," Vlad asserted. "But once we arrive at the school, we must warn Wraith of this." "Such a danger," Derek affirmed, "and so close to home." "We will make this right if we can. But for now, we have to move on. This course took our father over a week to cross, and we must try to do it in 2 days' time." "Set the pace," Derek urged. And that's where we'll leave off, in the middle of page 214, where we'll begin the next episode. Thank you and have a great night.